Well, hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. When we think of the great ancient civilizational crossroads, our minds usually jump straight to the Middle East or maybe the Mediterranean. But today, we're heading east to unpack an absolutely incredible 1300-year history, the intertwining of Islam and Chinese civilization. This is a story of how a powerful idea traveled across brutal deserts and massive oceans long before modern borders even existed. It's an epic journey of merchants, emperors, global trade, and cultural synthesis, and we're going to walk through exactly how it all happened.
So let's clear up a huge historical misconception right out of the gate. While the early expansion of the Muslim world across the Middle East, Persia, and Central Asia was often driven by rapid conquest, the story in China is fundamentally different. Islam arrived there primarily through trade, diplomacy, migration, and cultural exchange. It literally wasn't about armies marching in to take over. Instead, it was about caravans and merchant ships carrying silk, gold, spices, and, along with all those physical goods, completely new ideas. Okay, Section 1, Arrival by Land and Sea. Picture this. It's the 7th century. As Islam is just emerging in Arabia, China is sitting right in the middle of the golden age of the wealthy, incredibly powerful Tang dynasty. Now, according to Chinese Muslim tradition, the very first Muslims arrived way back around 651 CE, and they navigated two seriously treacherous, but absolutely vital pathways. You had the overland Silk Road, which meant surviving brutal deserts and mountain passes. And then you had the maritime routes, sailing across the Indian Ocean straight into bustling cosmopolitan Chinese ports, like Guangzhou, Quanzhou, and Hangzhou. Trade was absolutely the engine here. These Muslim merchants brought some serious networking skills to the Tang capital of Chang'an, which was, at the time, one of the richest cities on the entire planet. And they weren't just trading basics either. They were moving really high-value commodities. We're talking silk, tea, porcelain, spices, horses, precious stones, the whole shebang. They became immensely wealthy orchestrating this trade. But honestly, the more important point is that many of them stayed. They settled down, intermarried with local Chinese women, and basically planted the seeds of brand new communities. Moving right along to Section 2, the Battle of Talas. Let's map this out because the timing is fascinating. You've got the death of Prophet Muhammad in 632 CE, then the arrival of the first Muslims in China around 651 CE, and then, exactly a century later, a massive collision. The rapidly expanding Islamic caliphates and the massive Tang dynasty finally bump into each other. In 751 CE, they clashed at the Battle of Talas, which was this truly monumental military encounter between the Muslim Abbasid forces and the Tang Chinese army. So the Abbasids actually win the battle, effectively stopping Chinese expansion further west into Central Asia. But here's the wild part. This didn't lead to a Muslim conquest of China. Actually, scratch that. It wasn't even close to a conquest. The dust settled, the borders stabilized, and peaceful trade and cultural connections almost immediately resumed. The merchants basically just went right back to work. And this right here triggers one of the craziest historical butterfly effects ever. Historians believe that Chinese prisoners captured at Talas actually knew the secret of papermaking. They brought this closely guarded technology into the Islamic world, and from there, it eventually made its way to Europe. Just think about that for a second. A single border skirmish in Central Asia ultimately gave the Western world paper. I mean, it completely rewrote global history. Which brings us to Section 3, blending two ancient cultures. The physical architecture is really the ultimate proof of this integration. As these Muslim communities grew in major trading cities, they obviously built places of worship. But unlike the massive domed and minaret-heavy mosques you'd see in the Middle East, many Chinese mosques, like the incredibly famous Great Mosque of Xi'an, utilized sweeping tiled roofs and traditional Chinese courtyards. Islam didn't try to overwrite the local culture. It adapted, weaving itself perfectly into the existing Chinese aesthetic landscape. It's truly a beautiful synthesis. But this synthesis went way beyond just buildings. It forged entirely new identities. Over time, a uniquely Chinese Muslim demographic developed. Enter the Hui people. Ethnically, they are very similar to the majority Han Chinese. The Hui speak Chinese and seamlessly combine traditional local customs with their Islamic beliefs. And today, they remain one of the absolute largest and most distinct Muslim demographics in all of China. All right, Section 4. Administrators to Great Admirals. Let's jump to the 1200s, the Mongols sweep across the continent, conquered China, and established the Yuan dynasty. Now, the Mongols had a very specific management style. They deliberately imported Muslims from Persia and Central Asia to act as elite administrators, scientists, engineers, and high-level government officials to help them run this vast new empire. Because of this really strategic move by the Mongols, Muslims gained highly prominent positions in society, and the Muslim population in China absolutely exploded. In fact, a lot of Chinese Muslim communities today trace their roots directly back to this specific era. Fast forward a bit to the 1400s. The Mongols have been pushed out, the Ming dynasty takes charge, and we are introduced to arguably the most famous Muslim in all of Chinese history. Enter Admiral Zheng He. Born into a Muslim family, this guy rose to become a legendary admiral for the Ming dynasty. He commanded these enormous treasure fleets, literally some of the largest wooden ships the world had ever seen. And he wasn't just out exploring for the fun of it. He was leading massive diplomatic missions across Southeast Asia, over to India, Arabia, and all the way to the coast of East Africa. His voyages forcefully demonstrated China's global influence during the 15th century and, crucially, significantly strengthened their trade ties with the wider Islamic world. Now, seeing all this incredible cultural blending and massive diplomatic success, we really have to pause and ask the obvious question. Has this 1,300-year history always been peaceful? That takes us to Section 5, Conflict and Modern Legacy. According to the source material for this explainer, the relationship between Chinese governments and Muslim populations has certainly faced severe challenges, especially out in the western regions of the country. During the 19th century, several major Muslim rebellions broke out against the government in western China. And in modern times, Muslim communities in regions like Xinjiang have faced political tensions that have drawn significant international attention. It's definitely a complex dynamic. While there has been profound cultural integration over the centuries, there are undeniable periods of deep conflict right up to the present day. But, when we zoom out and look at the entirety of the history we've covered today, the core thesis is super clear. Despite the modern challenges and historical conflicts, the story of Islam in China is not primarily a story of conquest. Fundamentally, it's a story of synthesis. It's a 1,300-year epic of merchants, travelers, diplomats, migration, trade, and cultural exchange. From those early caravans braving the Silk Road to the monumental voyages of Zheng He, Islam became deeply and permanently woven into the very fabric of Chinese history, heavily influencing its architecture, its culture, and its society. I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. We are living in an era right now where global trade routes are shifting once again, and the relationships between the Middle East, Central Asia, and China are totally back at the center of the world stage. As new Silk Roads are being built today, how will the foundations of this ancient 1,300-year-old relationship shape the economic and cultural future of the East? Well, understanding the incredible history we just explored might just be the only way to find out. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.
يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير